Welcome to Shifting Gears, the show that catapults you back into the driver's seat of your life. Buckle up and prepare to check your mirrors as you shift from autopilot to the exhilarating journey of alignment with your host, Dana S. Diaz, the Power Shifter. Get ready to rev your engines and accelerate towards your true potential.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Shifting Gears Live with me, Dana S. Diaz. And holy cow, do I have a lot to say today. We are doing shop talk today on the last episode with Gwen Isaacs, who is a certified clinical sexologist and intimacy coach. Her episode entitled From Sexual Shame to Erotic Sovereignty was a really interesting show because most people, including myself, thought we were going to get into the down and dirty details of, sexual relationships and such. But what was interesting was that it was more about who we are in the world, so to speak, and how we take that into the bedroom, because how we show up in one area of our lives is based on our subconscious beliefs. So we show up in that way in every aspect of our lives. But boy, do we have a lot to cover today. So I hope you're in for the full hour. We're just going to roll right into this. So my biggest takeaway from the show is that sexual shame has nothing to do with morality, nothing whatsoever. And I think that's one of the biggest myths people have about sexuality at all. Shame, whether it's sexual or any other type of shame, comes from nervous system conditioning. And if you've ever heard me talk about anything at all, I love the nervous system conditioning because we are conditioned usually by the age of 7. A lot of people don't realize that, and a lot of people don't believe it. So that's about 2nd or 3rd grade. You already have ideas about who you are and what your place and purpose in this world are. And this goes into your gender role expectations, cultural and social influences, what you see and what you experience, what you hear, what you're exposed to. All of those give you those little details about how you're supposed to show up in life. And one of those areas is, with your sexuality and in your sexual performance, so to speak, in the bedroom. But what's interesting to me about that is that we have to look at this specifically as women. I mean, we are on Women Thrive Media, and I am a woman, so I can only speak to the female experience. And this is not to dismiss men's experiences sexually, but it's just a completely different experience. But for us as women, historically, we have been denied rights to have same education, equal pay, equal say. Our voices have only recently, in recent decades, begun to be heard and accepted and allowed into general society. So we have to look at how this shows up in ourselves and how generational influences have now influenced us to carry the same shame about our sexuality and about our bodies, and how that moves into the bedroom. So I look at this, how these equal rights that we have fought for, they burned their bras in the 70s. So now women can go have educations and have careers. We're still working on the equal pay, and we're still working on a lot of things. We're not as progressive as we think we are, but that's a story for another day. But one thing I think is interesting is how there's still this disempowerment going on in the area of our bodies and our sexuality. Because if you think about this, women, let's just be real, whether you choose to have babies or not, think about the power that we have as women. We bring life into this world. We sustain humanity. And I don't know if you've ever really wrapped your head around that, but that's the biggest superpower any human being could ever have. So, of course, when you have that much power in you, just as a result of being, for existing, of course, people want to take that power away from you. And this, I think, is a big reason why women are disempowered in so many areas of life. Because if we are made to feel ashamed, if we are made to feel like we are inferior and that our voice doesn't matter and that our opinions don't matter and our feelings don't matter, all these things don't matter, then we won't push with this power that we have to keep creating this life that keeps disempowering us, right? So, oh, I'm sorry, I have notes everywhere. So this is where our sovereignty comes in, because when you realize your power, whether it's just within yourself and within the relationships with the people directly around you or in the frame of general society, we have to look at what our sovereignty means. Because if we give ourselves that permission, that freedom to voice what we want and to be free in having options and engaging in the choices that we give ourselves and enacting the life that we want to make for ourselves, being bold, being authentic, then that's the power that people don't want us to have. Because imagine what could be if we all were walking around with that kind of confidence, right? And that kind of authenticity. Because when you open yourself to that sort of authenticity, and we hear this word all the time, and let me be clear on what that means. Being authentic is giving yourself that permission to show up at work, at home, in social relationships, on social media, everywhere in life, as exactly who you are without inhibition. That means having a voice and having a loud voice, asking for what you want and knowing that you deserve what you want, having boundaries and having self-respect to know when your boundaries are being dishonored and to assert yourself in those situations. Being authentic is being confident in who you are and what you believe and standing firm in that so that your boundaries don't loosen or that they're not flexible when somebody tries to push one way or another, because people will always take issue with anybody that has very strict boundaries. And when your confidence rises, you are not worried about what other people think. You can understand that other people aren't going to like you, that they aren't going to agree with you, that they aren't going to have the same values or perspectives and what have you, but you still own yours without flexing on that. And again, this type of authenticity, that kind of boldness, that is power, especially when you take that power into your mind and into your body. And well, let's face it, what are we here to talk about? Into the bedroom. But what this really comes down to, and let's establish this first off, is your relationship with yourself. And I want you to think about this because I have a list of questions here. If you don't have a solid relationship with yourself, and I'm talking about loving yourself, even liking yourself. Let's start there. Respecting yourself enough to know when your boundaries are being violated. Respecting yourself enough to voice when you need to assert yourself and to knowing your voice has value. These are the things that you have to think about when you're talking about your relationship with yourself. Do you value your voice? Do you value your beliefs? Do you think they deserve to be had and to be spoken, to be considered? Do you feel deserving of happiness and deserving of pleasure? Do you believe you deserve respect? Because if you don't, that's something you're negotiating with yourself. Do you know what lights you up? What brings you joy? What makes you feel good? And do you honor those things? And there's no shame or judgment here. I want everybody to know this is a safe space to be radically honest with yourself, because that's where growth is going to occur. But listen to that last question. Do you know what lights you up, what brings you joy, and what makes you feel good? because this is a key. If you know what those things are, and I think everybody does, are you honoring them? Or are you dismissing them in deference to other people's happiness? And it's okay, because that's what women do. And that's what we're taught that we're supposed to do. We are taught that we are supposed to serve everybody's needs, right? We're the caretakers, we're the nurturers, because that life that we bring in the world is now our responsibility to take care of. Other people don't necessarily have that choice. We do have a choice still, certainly, but most of us choose when we're bonding with that baby that we just birthed. We bond with it, and we know that it's our responsibility and our duty to take care of that baby. And that is what we do. But we take care of our children, we take care of our partners, we take care of our elderly, our family members, people in our community, our neighbors, where we want to take care of other people. And that's a wonderful way to be. But what happens is we abandon ourselves. We lose ourselves in all of those roles and responsibilities. And what's left at the end of the day, we just don't have anything else to give, right? So we don't give to ourselves. So if you're one of those people that says, yes, I know what lights me up, I know what brings me joy, I know what brings me happiness, because of course you do. It could be dancing. I love dancing, so of course that's my go-to. It's listening to music. It's maybe a favorite place you like to go. Maybe it's some activity you like. I love roller skating. I know that's so 80s, but it's fun to do. But why don't you do it then? Why aren't you doing it? Because you have given so much of yourself to other people that there is nothing left for you. Well, if that's the way you treat yourself, and again, I'm holding your hand while I'm saying this, I'm very direct and it comes off a little harsh sometimes, but if that's the way you're treating yourself, if you are dishonoring your own wants, if you are dishonoring your own needs, then how the hell can you expect other people to respect and honor your wants and needs? Now, this is more important probably outside of the bedroom, but it's pretty important inside the bedroom too. Because if you're abandoning yourself, if you don't have a really good relationship with yourself overall, if you are not your own best friend and your own personal advocate and your biggest cheerleader, then you are missing out on that authenticity that will free you from all the bounds of society and family and relational dictation. Because everybody is always telling you what you should do and how you're supposed to be. But what if it's okay to just be who you are without restrictions? I mean, within the bounds of the law and, respect for human life and well, animal life too, and all those things. But you understand what I'm saying, because you are the only one with the power to choose who you are and how your life goes. And you are the only one who can choose whether you're going to give your power away or hone in on it and harness it. So when you're repeatedly performing in life, you're acting in all these roles. Oftentimes you don't even know who the heck you are really outside of those things. And who you are, I would say, goes back to that question I keep saying: what lights you up? What brings you joy? What are your core values? That's who you are. And that is what you should be taking. And here I say should, and I just said I don't like the word should, but that is what I would recommend go in the bedroom with you, because the problems that occur in the bedroom usually are the same problems you're going to have out in life, which is when you're people pleasing, not asserting yourself, not enforcing your boundaries, not having boundaries. That's unfortunately the case for many women. And this is where lines are going to get crossed. This is where miscommunication or lack of communication happens. This is where sexual abuse and certain things get misconstrued in the bedroom and leave somebody feeling violated. So there can be some serious consequences. But I think going back to this shame piece, women historically are shamed for having a voice and for asserting yourselves. I mean, if you think about it in social life, on social media. If you are a woman who speaks your mind and dare you have an opinion that goes against the grain or is so bold that it's straight out controversial and really disrupts people's sense of how things are supposed to be, that woman that speaks that is the one being deemed difficult, right? She's a rebel. She's different than everybody else, so she can't be good, so to speak. She's put in this separate category that is not a nice one and called all kinds of unkind names. And we see this too when you're the type of woman who has demands in the workplace. You demand respect. You command a room. Notice all those words have the word man in it, but that was just a side note. I digress. But she has masculine qualities, but look what we call her. She's a bitch. She thinks she's something else, whatever it is. It's not okay. It's just generally not okay, not well accepted for women to be assertive and for women to hone and harness their power. But I say to hell with that, because you have the power, and it doesn't have to come off in a commanding and dictator-like type of way. You can own your power and still be gentle and still be soft and whatever feminine qualities you might have, or just personal qualities. There are many women that have a little more of a masculine energy and are a little more, kind of aggressive with their power. And that's okay too, because here's the thing, we're all human and we're all completely different, and we're all entitled to be whoever it is that we are. And again, inside and outside the bedroom. So let's go back to this shame again, because this is really important. And I feel like the shame is always sort of entangled with this lack of asserting ourselves and asserting our boundaries, because women fear the consequences, because that's essentially where shame comes in. We're told that if you do this, you're going to be rejected. If you do this, people aren't going to like you. If you do this, you will not be socially accepted. That's essentially what shame is, right? I mean, when I was growing up, for those of you who've read my second book or heard some of my talks, including the talk I will be giving in the 2026 Women Thrive Summit on March 20th. Mark your calendar and go register, by the way. But I do talk about, my second book is called Choking on Shame. And for me, that shame came in as a child of a teenage mother who hadn't wanted me, but she had experienced so much ridicule and judgment for having had me so young that she projected that shame onto me. I couldn't be good, so she could feel better about having had me so young. Everything had to be wrong with me so that she could feel better about having had sex at a young age, which was not obviously appropriate socially at the time, which is why she experienced so much shame. So I lived 4+ decades of my life carrying that shame with me. That shows up as people pleasing, codependency, conflict avoidance, succumbing to pressure, all of these different qualities that basically, made me feel powerless and made me feel weak in so many ways, and made me feel like there were no choices, there were no options, and sometimes like there was no escape. But it all ended up feeling like suffering, because I was always upset that people disrespected me, dishonored me, dismissed me, disacknowledged me, all these things. And what happened was that carried into my adult relationships, which, sexuality and sexual intercourse is part of those relationships. And what that turned into was I didn't feel like I had worth. I was actually told as a child that I shouldn't have even been born. So I felt like I shouldn't even exist in this world. But the only thing, and this was also told to me when I was young, the only thing a man's ever going to want from me is my body. And I was judged for what I ate. I was judged about my body appearance, whether I gained a little weight or lost a little weight. I was always shamed. And so I carried that into my adult relationships, tying my body image, how I appeared physically, to my worth. And I had tied sexual performance to my worth. Now, this is something I've only recently undone, and I'm 50 years old. But even in my marriage with my husband now, this is something that, came up, and thank God it did. And thank God that he knew what he was getting into when he married a girl that came from a lifetime of trauma. But it was something that I was glad came up, because when I started to heal from all those years of abuse and trauma, my childhood and my first marriage, which lasted 25 years, I started to develop a sense of who I was again. I found myself again. I rediscovered my voice. I started to have that confidence again. I started to realize my worth. And when I started to realize my worth, these things were coming up, because I would, previous to that, be in the bedroom wondering, why isn't my husband trying to, engage in sexual activity with me? Why aren't we being intimate? Does he not want me? Did I gain weight? Because I have gained weight. I was only 93 skeletal pounds when he basically scraped me up off the floor, and saved me, so to speak. And now I'm at a healthy weight, and thank God. But it has taken some getting used to because of my body image issues. But again, I was tying that to my sexual worth. So I was tuning in, or turning his, being tired after work and just wanting to go to bed, to, oh my gosh, I've gained too much weight, or, oh my gosh, he doesn't want me. And if he doesn't want me, then it means he doesn't love me. And that was a lot to unmuck. But I feel like I'm not the only one who has had these issues because of eating disorders, body image issues. And again, that goes back to the shame. Because let's be real, in this society, growing up, I know even in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I saw billboards, I saw magazines, I saw television commercials, I saw everybody lusting after Pamela Anderson running down the beach in the Baywatch, intro. I mean, come on, how could we all miss that? Farrah Fawcett in the 70s with the feathered hair and her natural beauty. And we have come so far now in 2026, but not as far as we would have liked to have come, like every other area, that we have with women's issues. Because look at what we see still on social media and in movies. We are seeing women like Sofia Vergara, who is just drop dead gorgeous, and that body just doesn't stop. But we look at ourselves and say, well, I don't look like that. So then maybe some of us feel bad about ourselves, and we don't feel that we're worthy. And then we take that insecurity into the bedroom, thinking, well, I have nothing to offer in this sexual, intimate relationship that I'm in. I have nothing to offer my husband, my partner, my whoever. So now I'm going to be insecure, and I'm going to let them do whatever they want to do, and not assert myself and not assert my boundaries, because you're basically dishonoring yourself that way, which is not a shameful thing. And I'm sorry to say it, but it's just something that we take again from outside the bedroom to inside the bedroom. But then there's the other side of that. Going back again, looking at Pam Anderson on Baywatch and watching Sofia Vergara just, grace all these red carpets with these gowns that hug her curves. And she's so confident, and that accent just gets some people going. I mean, she's freaking gorgeous. But then we're like, okay, well, I want to wear a dress like that. See, now I'm that girl now. I will put on that dress. I will wear the thing. Even right now, you can't see it, but I've got a crop top and, some leggings on. And, I go out in public and people stare at me as if I'm being offensive. I work out a lot. I take care of my body. I eat like a health nut, protein and avocados and all the things. This is my, I worship my body because I want to take care of it and I want to be healthy. But people get triggered by my body because of their insecurities with their bodies. And then I turn into a villain. I turn into that I'm loose, that I'm a whore. I've even been accused of body shaming women just because I'm trim and take care of myself. I'm fit. This isn't a competition. I'm not trying to compete with anybody. I'm just trying to take care of me because I honor myself now. And believe it or not, you can look at me and think, envy that I have a fit body that, you have maybe worked at and not achieved yet, whatever it is. But at the same time, I have the same body issues as you, if you're that person. I still sometimes go into the bedroom and think, I've gained 17 pounds since I married my husband. I hope he still finds me desirable. But again, we have to turn that back around with our relationship with ourselves. And I have to look in the mirror at myself and say, look at how far you come. You look healthy now. You don't look like you're starving yourself. You don't look like the sick that you really were inside. You're healthy. Embrace that because it's beautiful. And it doesn't matter. Weight doesn't matter. The curves, the imperfections, the scars, the stretch marks. I just noticed some stretch marks on my body. I blame my son who's 22, but whatever. We all have that. The little belly, we all have it. I remember in the 90s, I was so trying to see daylight between my thighs because I was always seeing those commercials with Suzanne Summers with that Thigh Master or whatever that horrible contraption was. And why? Why? Who is looking for daylight between my thighs other than me? I mean, if somebody was, then they're not valuing me as a human being. They're not valuing my mind and my soul and my energy and the beautiful things I have to offer in a relationship. If they want daylight between my thighs, well, it ain't going to happen. They can go bark up another tree. But again, this is how we are influenced by society and by other people. But I will always tell you to look toward yourself. You can be offended. You can call a woman like me loose and oh, she dresses provocatively and whatever. I don't care anymore because I know my value and I know who I am. And I'm proud of how hard I work on my health. And so I will absolutely, deem it valid. How did I overcome? We will get to that. And thank you for asking that question. So the overcoming, it really goes back to that relationship with yourself. Because I'm going to say this, I'm going to go back to what I was starting to say before, but if you don't love and honor and respect yourself, how the hell do you expect other people to? And that comes back to your body. Because now I can look in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm a little bit bigger than I was before, but I was sick before and I'm healthy now and I feel better. And you know what? My husband's love has not waned. It has not changed for me. So, who would have thought, all that crap that my stepfather used to tell me about the only thing a man would ever want from me is my body. And, the only nice thing he ever said to me once was that I was pretty. But this was a man who also, when I was 12 years old and I was wearing a leotard to dance class, told me that I looked like a whore. So why am I even giving any credibility to that type of opinion? You have to just look at the logic in your head and again, own who you are. Look in the mirror and say, yeah, I've got stretch marks. I brought a human life into this world, a human life. Do you realize how amazing that is? And maybe you haven't had children yet, but you can embrace the curves in your body. Again, look at Sofia Vergara, look at Rebel Wilson's another one. I don't think many people look at her, even though I think she has gone through a weight loss transformation, but, nobody looked at her and thought any less of her. She's hysterical. She is a brilliant actress, right? It's who she is inside. That's what exudes. That's her energy. And that's what you have. As a woman, as a man, as anybody in this world, that is who you are. And that is what you need to embrace and value and respect and fall in love with. And that is how I overcame. It was owning myself and say, yeah, you know what? I'm 50. I look pretty damn good for 50. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's all the avocados I eat. Maybe, it's the facial cream I use. I don't know. Maybe it's the workouts I do, but I take care of me because I love me. And that's okay. Again, society, always wants to find ways to disconnect us from who we are. And they want to disconnect us from even seeing that we should love ourselves or that we can love ourselves. They're always showing us what's wrong with us, right? On social media, people just love taking those digs to knock you down. Who cares? Who are they? They might be living in some trailer in some back-ass woods, and no offense if you are, but I mean, who is anybody to judge anybody? We're all here just trying to get through the muck of life, and you have to just be okay with who you are. That's how you overcome. And I mean, I can certainly help you with this. I'm actually launching a program, which I will be introducing in the Women Thrive Talk that I'm giving on March 20th. So please, if you haven't already, register for that. But we have to look at how all of this advertising and this body shaming and all these things are constantly telling us, all these creams and this, you have to have the hyaluronic acid in your foundation or your facial cream so you don't get wrinkles, because you don't want to get wrinkles. And we look at all these celebrities in Hollywood that are 70 and look like they're 20. And you're like, what the hell is going on? Like, what are they on? And you hear they're on this and they're on that. And they're hear all kinds of things about that. But why do we have to concern ourselves with it? Why isn't it okay to just age gracefully and be who we want to be? I like makeup. I've always liked makeup, and I like having my hair long. I actually went to a hairdresser a few years ago who said, well, at your age, and she wanted to cut my hair short, which actually, I'm looking in my reflection, it would be really cute if it was that, but it's not what I want right now. I like my long hair and I like makeup, and I see women like Pam Anderson, perfect example. She used to be the Baywatch babe, right? With the makeup and the hair and the body and the bosom, the whole thing. But look at her now. We should want to embrace aging like she does. She goes on red carpets without a stitch of makeup. She has her natural hair, her skin, she is getting older. So it shows in her skin. But why are we ashamed of that? Because society is making us ashamed of it. Because society is always telling us that we have to be 20 years old, that, and let's be real, I know that it's what's the word? It's alluring to people. It's attractive to look younger and to look, alluring is the same word that keeps coming to mind, because that attraction, if we go based on primal needs, we're supposed to have sexual intercourse to create life. And that is the purpose of a man and a woman coming together and whatever. But, I'm going to take a note from my very best friend of 30 years who, people were always asking me, is she bisexual? Is she, homosexual? Like, what is she? And I'm like, I don't know. She's my best friend and I love her. If you want to be concerned with her sexuality, ask her. But I did say something to her one day, like, why is everybody so concerned about what you are? She just never wore dresses or skirts, I guess, and it bothered people. And she said, well, I love whoever. I don't care what form love comes to me in. And I mean, I'm at the point where I agree. I don't care what you do. What you do is your business. If you have religious beliefs around it, if there's cultural beliefs around it, that's your business. It's not my place to judge what anybody else should do. But I would say the same goes into the bedroom, because we cannot put these limitations on who we are, because that is removing our authenticity. That is disconnecting us from ourselves and disrespecting that relationship. So again, if you know who you are, if you know what you like, and I'm going to go straight into this bedroom stuff. If you know what pleases you, if you know what you like, then assert that. I'm going to go back to my husband. He was afraid of what I might say, but I'll keep it nice. When we first got together, obviously he knew what the situation was in my previous marriage, and there was sexual abuse that took place there. So he wanted to be very gentle and respectful about it, and he was very sweet. He was always, when we started having intimate relations, he would just communicate during the process. Is it okay if I Is this okay? Do you like that? And I would tell him. I was not afraid. I was not ashamed. I was a little shy because it was new, being with somebody who actually considered how I felt instead of just pinning me down and proving power, which is a whole other thing that we won't get into today because I don't want to trigger anybody. But if you can have that, when you're engaged with somebody else, that's where you're going to have that good sexual relationship, and that healthy energy exchange is when you can have those communications. Because, knowing that I could trust, knowing that I was safe, and safe is the key word there, safe with this man, that he was going to be conscientious about how he was treating my body, and that I was going to honor and respect how he treated my body and assert myself. That is why we have we have a really good sexual relationship. And, it is expanded now that we've been married almost 5 years and, been together and whatever. So, that's how I would say you want to sort of test that out. If you are that people pleaser and that person that avoids conflict, and you have some shame or fear around asserting yourself, it's just baby steps. Know what your absolute deal breakers are and just say, this makes me uncomfortable. And I say this, and again, in and out of the bedroom, the biggest thing is if somebody does not respect you enough to say, okay, I understand, duly noted, whatever it is, they don't care about you. And unfortunately, and I was one of those people that was married to somebody that could have cared less about what I wanted or what I deserved, or whether I was violated or not. And that's a problem. And, if you accept that, that's your business, no judgment. But I want to give you the very clear indication that you and only you have the choice of whether to assert yourself and allow what you're going to allow. And I understand that this is not in all situations. I don't think anything can be applied so generally, because I know there are certain cases where women do assert themselves and somebody still overpowers them. But that's another thing to talk about. I think it's very interesting that we do get in these situations where, you are made to feel ashamed sexually when you're performing sexually, if you do anything other than lie under a man. Missionary style, that's acceptable. But if you do anything other than that, if you get a little more actively involved or do some different things, now you're just, oh, she's wild in the bedroom. She's a beast. She's all these things. And you get called a dominatrix or whatever else. If that bothers you, that's on you. But you have to own who you are. I think it's very powerful when I can walk in my bedroom and tell my husband, tonight, not into this or that or the other thing. And there are times where we talked about this when Gwen was on the show last time. Sometimes you do want to give of yourself to your partner, but you're just, for whatever reason, maybe you're not feeling the best. Maybe it's been a long day, you're exhausted. And I call it starfishing. You're just like, okay, go for it, take it, because I love you and I just want you to be happy. And that's okay if that's your choice. But if it's not your choice, we need to talk about some boundaries and getting your voice a lot louder than what it is probably. And back into the body, I just feel like there's so much here, and I'm sorry if I'm all over the place. I have so many notes, it's ridiculous. I wanted to tell a story, and this will go back to the viewer's question about overcoming. I'm actually really appreciative that when I was younger, I think I was about fifth or sixth grade, somewhere around there, I had befriended a girl at school who had come from Switzerland. Her father was Swiss. Her mother was from America, but went over there, married this man, and they had, my friend, and I won't name the names. But anyway, my Swiss friend, I would go to her place all the time because, again, I grew up in an abusive home and I just really didn't want to have anybody over to see how I was treated. I was pretty embarrassed about how I was treated and what went on in the home. But anyway, I was at her and her mom's condo a lot. Her mom had divorced dad and moved back to America with my little friend. So I want to say it was about 5th grade or so. And I remember we were actually singing and dancing in the living room to Madonna's True Blue, if anybody remembers that. It's kind of like had kind of a 50s kind of a melody to it. And I remember her mother just walking through, going to the kitchen to get a snack or a drink or whatever. And she was, I mean, head to toe naked, butt naked. Okay. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I thought, like, I did not just see that. But then her mom came through and sat on the couch and watched us dance and sing. And I witnessed my friend was completely oblivious to the fact that her mother's sitting there completely stark naked. And so then I started to kind of question myself because, again, growing up, my mother was one, like, my God, she was like with turtlenecks and, very pious seeming, not pious at all, but seemingly so. At least the way she dressed was beyond conservative. Like, I remember we wore pants and long sleeves in the summer. But, couldn't show any skin. It was part of that shame about her having had me as a teenager that she had to like overdo it. And it was exhausting. But anyway, so coming from that perspective and that type of home life, seeing this woman just walking around naked and her mother just matter of factly, my friend's mother sitting there, she obviously saw I was a little uncomfortable. And she said, "Does it bother you that I'm sitting here naked?" And I didn't know what to say because I was embarrassed that she would notice my discomfort. And again, I'm 5th grade. What are you, 10 years old, 11? So, I kind of nodded a little nervously because I was like, I don't want to have this conversation with this woman, right? But she was so cool because to say she was, just everything in her energy was very calm and very cool and just so at peace. Like, I envy that. I envied it then. I envy it now. But she said, well, it's strange. She said, in Europe, we're not ashamed of our bodies. It doesn't matter what your body is. It doesn't, and I thought about that and I'm like, yeah, even at that young age, I was, I could compare that to how we are here in the US that, oh my gosh, God forbid your skirt's a little short or you show a little too much cleavage. People presume things about you. And, I don't know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I don't think it's right to we talk about putting people in a box and stereotyping them. And I just think it was so interesting that she brought that to my mind. And then after that, I could not unsee every time we were maybe at a school function or like even, on the rare occasion she would drop me off at home after, I played at my friend's house. She was back then they walked you to the door because they wanted to make sure you got in safely. And I would see and hear the conversations between my mother and stepfather about, oh, she dresses like a whore. She dresses like a whore. My friend's mother had a beautiful body, again, I guess she was very trim and, she was beautiful and she owned it. And I think that was the thing, like looking back, I don't think she was so much attractive as just her energy was so confident and cool and relaxed. She knew who she was and she didn't give a flying F about what anybody else thought. So while I was watching everybody's parents stare at her because she wore things that maybe, were form-fitting and showed her body, or she would wear halter tops in the summer because she'd take us to the beach or driving us down Lakeshore Drive at Michigan Avenue in Chicago and taking us to the shops. And, I loved that about her. And it just made me want to strive to be more like that. So I was so glad to have that experience, but it made me sad to see how my own mother and stepfather and other people's parents just looked down on her and presumed so many things about her. And she eventually moved away after 8th grade graduation. I lost touch with them, but that always impacted my life because, well, I don't know, we don't need to get into me, but I'm that way now where I'm not going to shame myself about my body. I'm not, why do I have to? We all, I've seen women that have 5 children and are that trim. And I see women that have no children that just genetically, they have a tendency to weigh a little bit more, or, people have health issues that, block their attempts to diet and to lose weight. But why are we trying so hard to be something we're not? Why can't we just be who we are, love who we are, and then maybe, require that other people love us that way too? Why do we have to be something that we're not? So that's where I would encourage the authenticity, not just in how you see yourself and how you carry yourself, but just be you. If you are, you don't have to be 100 pounds and have a flat belly, like me, to wear a form-fitting dress. I now see women, I love when I see a pregnant woman with a form-fitting dress, because I'm like, that is the most beautiful thing in my book, with her bosom just filling with the milk and that life just being developed in her body. That's gorgeous to me. And no woman should ever be made to feel that she's not beautiful. I don't care where you're from. I don't care how much you weigh, how tall you are, whatever. We are so much more than our physical bodies. But you have to be the one to show the world who you are. You. Nobody can do that for you. And you do that by having a voice and by being confident and exuding all that beautiful energy that you have in you and sharing that with the world. You have to trust yourself enough and know who you are and stand firm in who you are to be able to walk through life and being open to and okay with people staring and judging and criticizing and presuming. Lord knows I do every day of my life, including with my husband's family. And I'm okay with it because I love me, he loves me, my kid loves me, my stepson that lives with us, we have a great relationship. Like, you have your tribe. So don't limit yourself and don't give too much credit, and certainly don't give any power away to people that are quick to judge and put you in a box. We don't want any stereotypes here. I have a few things I want to cover here as well. Just a few questions that were sent to me previous to the show that I wanted to give a few answers for. So let's go right into these. So the first one was, what beliefs about sex are women subconsciously carrying from childhood into adulthood? And I think we sort of covered that already. I think we actually covered it quite a bit. I think it definitely does tie into what you were told about who you are in your childhood, your subconscious core beliefs, because those carry into everything. One thing I will talk about in my Women Thrive talk on the last day of the summit, which is March 20th, my talk is called You Become What You Believe. And it's based on this idea that what you were told about who you are and what you were told about who you should be and continually are throughout life, it shapes your subconscious beliefs about who you are and your place in this world. And that will show up in every relationship. And for me, that was hearing at 4 years old that I was a mistake, that I was an accident, that I shouldn't have been born. And then that being reiterated in the verbal abuse, in the physical abuse, and then emotional neglect, all these different ways. And then, repeated again in my first marriage, which lasted 25 years. And so certainly having those feelings of unworthiness, did carry into my beliefs about sex, feeling I wasn't worthy of voicing what I want, that I wasn't worthy of actually enjoying intimate interactions. I was just supposed to be, my first husband's playground, so to speak, because I wasn't allowed to have a voice in anything beyond that. I wasn't allowed to assert myself. And that's how, society again silences us in every area of our lives. But again, it's up to you to have the power. We can rewrite our subconscious beliefs. We can reprogram ourselves. And again, I am launching a course in March. I'm very excited that actually guides you through this process and integrates a more empowering belief system in a structured way that will make a change for you in less than 90 days. So I'm excited about that. Stay tuned. Second question, What does erotic confidence look like in a woman over 40, and why is it so appealing? I love this question. I am a woman over 40. I just turned 50 2 months ago. So this is interesting because we hear these terms MILF, mother I'd like to, what, and cougar. And in this MILF and cougar culture, I have to say, I think what's appealing is when you start perimenopause, when you get to a certain age, you just don't give an F anymore. You just don't care what other people think. I mean, for me, I'll be honest with you. When I first started perimenopause, I had no idea. I had missed 3 months of my menstrual cycle, and I actually thought I was pregnant. And I was too afraid to tell my husband, who is turning 60. He's 11 years older than me, and I was too afraid to tell him because I thought, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to tell this man that he might be a father at 60 years old? And, I don't know how well that would have gone over with his family. He would have been okay, but it was a little much. But my doctor was like, you're at that age, girl. Like, we don't need a pregnancy test. We need to take a hormone test. And sure enough, I was in perimenopause. And, it sort of forced me because I did gain, 10 pounds within those 3 months. And my hormones changed, things fluctuated, things are still sort of, working themselves out. But it gets you to the point where you just surrender because you're like, this is just what it is. There's nothing I can do. I mean, there are things you can do. You can do hormone replacement, work more with weights than doing cardio, things like that. But to a certain extent, your body changes. You're in a different phase of life and you've got to embrace it, because if you fight it, you're just going to be bringing on more anxiety, more depression, more suffering, more disappointment in yourself because you're not seeing the results you're getting from the attempts you're making to change things. But why do you want to change the biological process? This is a beautiful time in life when you really bloom into your full authenticity. And I think that is why it's so appealing, because when you talk about MILFs and cougars, I mean, whether you want to have interactions with a younger man or not, the appeal for them is that we're a little more feral and uninhibited at this age. And that's in social life and, well, also when the door is closed. So that's an interesting question. Thank you for the viewer who asked that. This is a good one. How can you tell the difference between healthy sexual compromise and self-abandonment? Ooh. Healthy sexual compromise. So this goes back to when I was talking about how sometimes you just, maybe you're not into it, you're not feeling in the mood, but you want to give, sometimes we do make those sacrifices. Like, I want my partner to be happy. I want my partner to have, that part of me, if that's what you choose. And I think that is a healthy sexual compromise, as long as it is your choice and that you're not being coerced or manipulated. So I think that the difference between healthy sexual compromise and self-abandonment is just that gut feeling. You will feel uneasy. You will feel very unsettled if a boundary is being violated. You will know if you are agreeing or submitting to a situation that you really don't want to. And so I think that's where it comes in. And this also comes in giving yourself your voice back, giving yourself permission to assert yourself. Because there are times, I had some kind of intestinal thing going on the other night, and I love my husband. And actually I was the one that was like, I want to so much, but my stomach, I'm not feeling it. My mind is, my body wants to, but my body's also saying tonight it's just not going to happen. And that's okay. That's okay. And he loves me. He held me. We went to sleep. And that was that. That's because somebody, when they care about you, they honor that. The problem comes in when you assert yourself and the person doesn't care and they proceed to do with you what they will. But it's up to you to make sure that doesn't happen. That is the self-abandonment. You don't ever want to abandon yourself. Always honor yourself first and foremost, and know that it doesn't always have to be actual intercourse in the bedroom. There are plenty of other things and ways to express and exchange sexual energy that are just as delightful. And you don't even need a partner for some of them. So that's what we'll say about that. Last question before we wrap it up. How does a woman's relationship with pleasure impact confidence in other areas of life? Well, I think, again, this goes back to knowing yourself, right? When you know yourself and you know your power, and you're not going to let anybody deter you or coerce you or manipulate you or make you flex your boundaries, then you're owning yourself. You're living in your full authenticity. I mean, nobody can come in here, for example, and this is just the random thing that comes to mind. I've never done recreational drugs. I have no intention to. Again, I live a healthy lifestyle, so drugs aren't part of that. So if somebody walked in here and said, hey, do you want to do drugs? And they come on, and all the pressure, the answer is always going to be no. I'd actually probably, after a few times, tell them to leave my damn house and get away from me and never associate with them again, because they're being disrespectful by being pushy and dishonoring the first time that I said what my answer was. So I say this as an example of, in every situation in life, assert yourself. That is where confidence comes in. So a woman's relationship with pleasure, how does it impact her confidence? Well, when you know what you like and you know what you want, you're going to make sure you have pleasure, right? And whether that's with yourself, whether that's with another person, whether that means going, out dancing with your friends on Friday night, or spending Saturday night with, your guy and having some fun, doing whatever you do, whatever it is, that's your choice. But that is how pleasure impacts confidence, because I'm going to tell you what, and I have a feeling more women have been here than than they would like to admit, but I'm sure many of us can relate. I have certainly been in those situations where the things happen and you didn't want them to happen and you didn't like it and you didn't feel good. It doesn't make you feel very confident. That's because you're disappointed in yourself for not asserting yourself. And it's hard to feel pleasure in a situation that you really don't want to be happening, right? When you're really not exchanging good, safe energy with that other person. So, we had a lot to cover there. And I actually have things I didn't even get to, but we are wrapping it up for today. So I want to thank everybody who joined us. This was, I feel like, a really powerful conversation to have, particularly being that we're wrapping up February, a month of love and Valentine's and all the stuff. But 2 things before we go. Well, actually 3. I've said it a few times, but if you have not registered for the 2026 Women Thrive Summit, please do so. 5 days, March 16th to 20th. There are 50 speakers over those 5 days, all time zones. This is a global event. It is filling up. There are plenty of spots. It is a virtual event, so please, please, please get in these rooms. There are people speaking about professional development, personal development, and everything in between. The guest that we spoke about today, Gwyn Isaacs, the certified sexologist and intimacy coach, will be speaking in the summit. I, your host, Dana S. Diaz, will be speaking in the summit. My talk is on Friday, March 20th, and I'm actually the closing speaker of the event, talking more about a lot of the stuff we talked about today. So I hope you will join me. And our next guest for our next show, which is on the second Wednesday of March, Lisa Tyndall. I am thrilled because I adore this woman. Like I to the moon and back. I love, love, love this woman. She will be talking to us about money, because March, we talk about St. Patty's Day and luck, and everybody wants that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, Lisa's going to show us how we get there with her $1 million pathway. And incidentally, Lisa will also be a speaker in the 2026 Women Thrive Summit. Lisa's talk is also on Friday, March 20th. And she and I were so delighted to know she is opening the day with her talk and I am closing the day. So you're going to have both of us powerhouses together in my next episode. So don't miss out. Thank you again for joining us, and go be confident, go be everything that you want to be, make a beautiful life for yourself, but most importantly, be you to the full, because you're all beautiful. Love you. Mwah. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Shifting Gears, where transformation isn't just talk, it's a conscious shift into the best and happiest version of you. Until next time, enjoy the open road. And if today's episode inspired you, be sure to like, share, and follow so you never miss what's coming next.